Don't mistake duality for all that is. Don't mistake duality for all that is. So if we forget spirit, then we've cut ourselves off from that dimension, and all that appears to be is just this duality of experience, this time-space world experience. And then that becomes our all, that becomes our everything. And this is very dangerous. If what we conceive of as everything occludes or omits spirit, then we've cut ourselves off from any hope of love. So this is a huge point. In understanding everything, do not forget spirit. Do not. Leave out spirit from your life, because your life is spirit. And if you leave out spirit from life, life is not itself. Life seeks to be life. Life seeks to be life and live life through you. But don't mistake the duality for all that is. All that is what allows the duality to be. And all that is far beyond the duality, and yet expressed within the duality. And if you have the spiritual context to duality, then you can experience duality and still be in all that is, be in the presence of spirit whilst walking through the world. But if you, I've written here, if you don't align to the principles of consciousness, you can't expect to experience it. It's all circular, and it all comes back to you. So you must align if you want to experience. You must align to consciousness if you want to experience consciousness. Just like in the world, if you want to experience a certain subject, you must align to that subject. You must seek out where that subject occurs, where that is happening. You know, you're interested in train spotting. You've got to find the trains. You've got to find the train stations. You've got to do your research about it. That is aligning to that interest. So ultimately, our interest is the consciousness we are. If we want to experience that, we need to align to that, which means learning to be present to that. It's not outside yourself, like with other hobbies, other subjects. In time-space reality, i.e. separate, we go outside of ourselves to experience them. But consciousness is not like a boxed up subject that can be studied by professors. In the world, that happens. But consciousness is broader than any individual subject. Spirit is broader than spirituality. Christ is more than a Christian. Buddha is more than a Buddhist, you know. These things are not concepts to be put into boxes. What I'm talking about here is not anything to be put into a box. Spirit is spirit always, even though it appears to be in boxes. The spirit is boundless and free, and that is your eternal nature. And if you choose anything less than that, just remember you're doing yourself an injustice. But you can choose to. It's all circular, and it all comes back to you. It's your choice, your consciousness. The creative power of the universe. You are that creating. You are that creating. Creativity, you are it. You know, we have the situation where people say, I'm a creative person, I'm not a creative person. Well, we are consciousness. We are that creative impulse. This is who we are. So I suppose it's like a person saying, I'm real and I'm not. And this is maybe what it comes back to. When we align to truth, we become truth. When we don't align to truth, then we're lost to truth. But it's a choice here and now. Creativity runs through heart and mind, because heart and mind are consciousness in the animation of it. Consciousness is the animation of heart and mind. Consciousness is the expression, and consciousness is the process. Creativity moves through all that flows with life, as life flowing. This is life. This is life in experience. Life in essence is stillness, and it comes down and flows, just like from the pinnacle of a mountain, all the water, wherever it takes its starting point from, it comes down that mountain, and and it flows. It's stillness comes into movement. Creativity runs through it all. This is the creative process. It's all life and consciousness. It is the movement of all life and life forms, the creative power of the universe. One creative power. Don't separate consciousness, not without knowing the whole. Not unless you want to get lost in an aspect of it, a part of the whole. A part of and apart from, in a sense. So don't separate out consciousness without knowing the whole, unless you want to get lost in a certain aspect of consciousness, which is just a part of the whole, and then mistakenly think it is all there is, either an aspect of goodness or an aspect of badness. So you've got this whole spectrum, which the duality is held out across. So this duality of light and dark, it's not as simple as light starts here, dark starts here, and there's a firm boundary between them. It's a spectrum, from light to dark. It's a spectrum with many greys in between. So if we don't know the whole, and we've separated consciousness, and we've what have I written? Don't separate consciousness, not without knowing the whole, not unless you want to get lost in an aspect of it, a part of the whole, which you then mistakenly think is all that is. So we can lock ourselves into an aspect of the duality, goodness or badness, or creative or uncreative, or I've got a good life or I've got a bad life. We can lock ourselves into any concept, and concepts are only the product of our imagination. We don't need them unless we want to lock ourselves into a certain way of thinking. So we use concepts to configure the consciousness that we are. So how open are your concepts? How closed are your concepts? So we can get locked in any invented concept, like any section of all possibility, and we can kind of solidify what is fluid into an experience. This is what's happening. It can be seen as negative or positive. Like it can be seen as getting stuck in an all-moving, energetic consciousness, or it can be seen as choosing an experience and having that within an all-moving, energetic consciousness. But if we want to see the context, we have to know that we're limiting ourselves like this, whether we choose to or it's an unconscious happening. This is a limiting of ourself. It's an inventing of ourself on a lesser level than our true self. If we get lost in it like there's nothing else, then it's because to our experience, cut off from an understanding of spirit, there is nothing else. So in order to get beyond this, we need to return the aspect to the whole, and then we can do what we want, with the integrity of the consciousness of who we are. The knowing the whole, doing what you want, could never be against it. So what you want, do what you want. What you want, if you're disconnected from consciousness, it may have knock-on effects that are negative, but if you're doing what you want aligned to the truth of consciousness, which is the truth of life, which seeks to live, then you can never be against it. Not unless you're kidding yourself, because all will until we reach the divine source we are is a substitute for the will of God. Which is the inclination of living, loving consciousness to be the life it is. Once there, you're there, here. So it's not like consciousness. Consciousness can take any form. Consciousness can take any form. And yet ultimately it operates by certain principles. And they are the principles of life and of love. This is the law. Life and of love. Okay, so the starling's murmuration, so the movement of starlings across the sky in like this wave of pixelated form. This is something that came up recently. So this to me is the movement of consciousness. It's like each part, each starling is shaping the movement of consciousness, and that can be done collectively in this formation. So each one of those birds is connected to the life that it is innately. It is not saying, well, I'm going to do my own thing, I'm going to follow my own will and go this way. Well, maybe some birds do that, and that's alright as well. But there is a beauty to see consciousness operating, the individual parts operating in the unity that they are. And I heard, I don't know if it's true or not, it's a bit of hearsay, that each bird within that flock that moves through the sky in such a sort of beautiful, fluid manner, like the movement of sound, each bird apparently only knows what the few birds around it are doing. It doesn't know what the whole is doing, but it orients itself according to the birds around it, and as they orient themselves to the birds around them, it creates this sort of fluid kind of movement through the sky. And to me this is a mirror of the principles of consciousness. So I mentioned the principles of consciousness. I mean, if we don't go into this, then they can be manipulated. So it seems that consciousness, that life seeks to coalesce with itself, seeks to be in unity with itself. So this is the starling's murmuration, the movement of consciousness. And it's interesting that this has even been on, I remember it was on a beer advert like this. It just showed the movement of these birds through the sky, and then it just showed these beautiful pictures. It alluded to beauty, and then at the end it just had the name of the beer. And I think the slogan was something like, be part of something. And that appeals to us. It appeals to us as living beings, because life seeks to be part of something. And what is the something it seeks to be part of? It seeks to be part of itself. And this is just a beer advert. But even the word beer, it's like it's a hijack of a word to be, someone who bees. But anyway, that's neither here nor there, that's just a comment. So what am I saying with this? I'm saying that the law of consciousness, anything less than the pure flow of life happening, so the free flow of life, these birds moving throughout the sky, anything less than that is like a lesser expression to life. It's not as free as life, and life is freedom. So anything less than is freedom and its structure, it's all of it. Anything less than pure flow of life happening, and then consciousness appears to fall apart. So collectively, if everyone's working together, we have this, everyone's just working in line with consciousness, not even together, but just following themselves, because each self is a product of consciousness, is consciousness. So if we were all to just follow ourselves exactly as we wanted to, then all would be okay. But because we've lived in a society that has created distortions within us, there'd be a lot of chaos first. So without any distortions, just hypothetically now, without any distortions, consciousness operates fine by itself, We only need laws when we've been distorted out of our nature, because being in our nature, we're operating by the only law there is, which is the law of nature, which is ultimately the law of love, the law of love. Nature is not brutal, is not savage, and if it is only in service to love, which is the continuation of itself. There is no senseless violence in nature, there is only the perpetuation of life. Senseless violence is what happens in human societies which have been distorted away from their nature and then been told that they are inherently brutal. And this is what we've been conditioned with. We've been sold for years and years and years the idea that nature is brutal. And yeah, it may appear so, but only to a limited part which has separated itself off from nature. When you realise you are nature, then you realise it's all love. So anything less than pure flow of life happening, and consciousness appears to fall apart. So yeah, there's this natural harmonising, like the starlings in the flock. There's this, if each starling is following just their own natural inclination, then there's this unitive working of consciousness. An individual following their consciousness is the flock following its consciousness. It's the same process. And anything less than this natural flow, and the pure flow of life happening, and consciousness appears to fall apart into parts. It's like competition is separating out consciousness. If we have one person fighting another person, it is consciousness fighting consciousness. This is not nature. This is not nature, It's an aspect of nature. We see it as an aspect of nature, but it's not the totality of nature. So, and this is not health. Health is the free flow of life, not the blocking of that, not the pitting of it against itself. Nature is consciousness's flow. Health is this, life's flow. One animal kills another for food. This is consciousness's flow. So this is not consciousness coming up against consciousness, because that would be placing time-space parameters of this animal against this animal, when really that's one perspective in which nature does appear brutal. When we decide that that's one thing, that animal is one thing and that animal is another thing. But if we take the unitative view of consciousness, where we're not seeing individual animals isolated, because they're not isolated. The context is that all these animals together is just like, if you were to see it energetically, it would just be consciousness happening. And so one animal killing another for food, if you're locked in time and space separation mode, this is brutality. So time and space separation mode, we see brutality. But if we see it as one consciousness flow, when we're in the mode of unity, we no longer see the brutality, because it doesn't exist anymore to that way of seeing. It's just the movement of oneness. But when we distort this movement of oneness, when we separate it out and one army fights another, this is consciousness coming up against consciousness, and it leads to damage, physical, mental, spiritual, reverberations across all realms. And it starts with this spiritual misunderstanding that we can actually get somewhere by doing this, by pitting these people against these people, in a world where that is not necessary that it happens. Not ultimately, only to political ends, Necessity is not in nature. Not now, not at this stage of civilization. So, with spirit in charge, there are consequences, reverberations for separating out consciousness and pitting it against itself. It has a knock-on effect. Spiritual, mental, physical, emotional. This is why soldiers experience post-traumatic stress syndrome. It's because what they do is against their nature, and it's when we go against our nature that we suffer. And this is what teaches us: you've done it wrong. You've made a mistake. You've gone against the law of nature. And this is the same for health. This is the same for, you eat something that's not healthy. You feel bad. This is your nature telling you, well, that's not really good for me. That's, or depression. That's not just something that affects people by chance. That is something saying, it's a mechanism of nature to alert itself that something is not quite right. So you feel depressed. Okay, so, look at your life. What is it that's making you depressed? It's not about, when you don't see the context, you don't see that there's a reason. You don't see meaning without context of the whole. And so what's the solution when you don't see meaning, you don't see context of the whole? You take a pill to cover, to mask the symptom, rather than looking at the reason for the symptom. Because if you don't have the context of the whole, you're not joining the dots up. You're not seeing that the symptom has a reason. And with regards to depression, it's saying, okay, so it's telling you that something needs changing in your life, so you're more aligned with life itself. Just like anxiety, it's telling you, okay, your perspective is slightly skewed. If you're feeling you're not safe, if you're feeling that, you're feeling attacked, or you're feeling you've got far too limited a conception of who you are. If you're feeling overly self-conscious, it's like, well, why are you feeling that? What limiting beliefs are you holding about yourself that are not true? So it's always truth seeking to reassert itself over our misguidance. Spiritual truth violated has knock-on effects which we in turn have to go through to rectify our mistakes. It's, the balancing sheet. So there's life leading into and out of life versus life coming up against life. It's like it's different. It's different. Life coming up against life is malfunction, but life moving in and out of different forms and ways is just a flow. So this malfunction of life coming up against life, that is what happens when consciousness goes against itself. Going against consciousness and life is what happens when we don't understand it, and it is damaging. We do it to ourselves, and we've got to learn from these effects. Learn, and just like a child does, we are children of God, children of consciousness, children of the universe. Grow up and out of what just can't continue, which is what just doesn't work, which is what is not life. So if we box up the beautiful flow and it becomes something else, then it's life telling you to unbox that box, to come out of that version of life and into a more expanded view. So what we see in the world is the beautiful flow boxed up, and this creates problems in the world, and it's boxed up because we've boxed it up through our understanding, which is limited. So don't blame God, don't blame consciousness, God, consciousness, God. Don't blame this. Blame our own mechanisms that filter it, that box and label and limit and claim to be building something worthwhile to life. Or blame the mechanisms we've had implanted in us, but blame yourself, because you've taken them on. And don't blame yourself in a way that you put yourself in another box of not worthy, because that is the worst box you can put yourself in. Blame yourself kindly, inquiringly, to see your limitations, to move beyond them. So again, it's not blaming yourself for no reason. It's sort of like, ultimately it's not even blaming yourself, it's just seeing where you've gone wrong and making adjustments. And enjoy your limitations while they last, for they will not last forever. I just want to, before this bit, I just want to say, like, in the world that offers solutions, if the solution is coming from a separatist mentality, a time and space mentality, which most solutions certainly are presented on TV, in the arena of politics, are presenting, then it's no solution at all. The only solution is to realise the spirit, consciousness, God's love that you are, your true self. That is the only solution to any problem that's seen in the world. And that solution is held off for as long as the parts are invested in being parts. So long as the powerful are invested in being powerful, so long as the weak have got used to their weakness or are invested in that, then the problems continue along the same lines, because the problem isn't shifting out of the dualistic, separatist arena. So, if you're not interested in changing your life, fine. But if you are, don't claim to be without being open to spirit. Don't claim to be looking for solutions whilst neglecting spirit, because spirit is the solution. And if you're not looking at spirit, you're not open to the idea of spirit, but you're still apparently looking for solutions, then don't bother, because there are no solutions outside of the love, life, spirit that you are. So if you're looking for a solution but neglecting spirit, then just shut up, because you're not looking for a solution at all. You're just perpetuating the problem. The only revolution, the only real change that is going to happen in the world is a spiritual revolution. There's nothing else that needs to happen. And that is the only solution, to realise spirit. To realise spirit, to see that we are universal, to see that we are unity, and to see that unity is not formed through individuals relating themselves to a whole, but individuals operating in line with their universal essence, which inevitably leads to unity. But it's not a unity of mind concepts latched onto, it's a unity of love lived directly experienced. But in the meantime, enjoy your limitations while they last. Enjoy your limitations while they last, for they will not last forever. You are on the journey to Buddhahood. All of us? Yeah, all of us. It's not about individuals, it's about the whole. Individuals and the whole, holy individual. So each one of us is on the journey to Buddhahood, on the journey to the Christing of self, on the journey to self-realizing self, to self-becoming self, returning to self. Each one of us is on that journey. So if you're not there yet, enjoy your limitations while they last, for they will not last forever. So again, this comes back to presence. If we're feeling limited, often we resist our limits. But if we just sit with our limits, allow our limits, sit with difficult feelings rather than pushing them away, then being with them, we see them, they can dissolve through the light of consciousness shining on them, the light of us looking, the light of our consciousness looking in on what is apparently problematic, is what dissolves the problem, because there are no problems, essentially. It's just a way of looking at the world. So we're all working towards true self, light. We're all working towards Buddhahood, because the oneness that we are is that process happening of forgetting and remembering. So I've written here, one is working toward Buddhahood, one is a Buddha. So this idea, this way people used to speak, is seen as quite posh and sort of almost, it's rejected now a bit in society. Like, one is exploring one's nature, meaning I am exploring my nature. I think it's a beautiful way to talk about things because it's the truth of things. One is working towards Buddhahood, the oneness of all, and one is in an individual one, which is not different from the oneness of all. Microcosm, macrocosm. One is working towards Buddhahood. One is a Buddha. Let's use this term, one, meaning I. It's beautiful. Let's use it not meaning limited me, but meaning essence, meaning the oneness we are. Because that's obviously an understanding that existed in the past that has been lost now. That term came from this understanding, but it's lost. One is going shopping. All consciousness operating through you is going to the shops, you know. One, we all are. Some near, some far. But we work through limitations. They are the fuel of our experience, back to love. As we burn them away, we move. And as we burn them away, we move. And as they are burned, we return to stillness, love, light, source, true nature, one, we are. We work through limitations. They are the fuel of our experience, back to love. As we burn them away, as we burn our limitations away, we move. And as they are burned, we return to stillness. It's like there's this slowing down into stillness. And the more you're aligned to stillness, the more stillness draws you back in, because the one you are that is being drawn to the one is the same one. Stillness, love, light, source, true nature, one we are.